I don't know about you, but when it comes to horror games, I've always found myself drawn more to the indie side of things. Indie horror games never fail to impress me with their unique approaches to horror, often using strange tactics and techniques to set the mood and stage, taking creative risks rarely seen on their mainstream counterparts. Through them, we are able to experience previously unimagined horrors. From nightmarish depictions of infinity to deep explorations of the human psyche, and surreal and unsettling alterations of the familiar. It's like stepping into a whole new world of horror, one that's not limited by conventional gameplay mechanics. Indie game developers have the freedom to explore themes and ideas that would never see the light of day in any other industry. Tonight, I wish to share with you the works of one infamous developer known for creating some of the most twisted, unusual, and highly atmospheric horror games, known solely as Yames. And without further ado, let's immerse ourselves in his worlds and boot up our first title. Discover My Body is a short, straightforward game set in the future year of 2040. The game begins by informing us that in this future, humans are looking for increasingly strange solutions in hopes of finding connection and community. Distrusting of previous institutions that brought people together in common, lonely people now look to technology and science for answers. One such new technology that's been developed to aid with this is a lab-synthesized, psychically powerful fungus. We, a medical student at a local university, have been brought in to study the application of this fungus into a human host. The game already hints heavily at a world deeply troubled. The distrust of previous religious institutions and the rising rates of loneliness has made people look desperately for science and new technologies to help them. And due to the desperate situation, a desperate solution has been made. Our subject, who also happens to be a medical technician himself, asks us if we have ever studied a psychical transbilitution flowering before. He says that while he has assisted with many flowerings, this is in fact his first time in the hot seat. He then guides us to use a neutron coronal scanner to view his bodily systems as he undergoes his flowering, and that his brain's Broca area, which is the area linked with motor speech, has been linked to a digital readout device, so that even when he is at a point beyond human speech, he will still be able to communicate. The entire game plays like a sort of medical exam test, where we, the player, explore the patient's body, finding interest points, and our subject then gives us information back. And before long, we find our first interest point. Aha! You've discovered the injection site. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Morrison took a bone-deep needle to my right shin. However, what he injected was worth its weight in gold. It was a skin graft of a successful PTB flowering. What's that? It kind of looks like a face. Well, the PTB organism is a psychical organism. Its physical manifestation draws from a shared pool of all its denizens' traumas, fears, dreams. I believe that's my mother's face on my shin. Oh, how I miss her. And there it is, our first sign that whatever this fungus organism is, it is nothing ordinary. Its psychic nature somehow penetrated deep into his conscious and manifested itself in the shape of his dead mother's face. As we continue on scanning in the skeletal level, we then discover the fungal growth on his bone. The subject adds, "Aha, you've discovered my rotting bones." Yes, the rot has set in certainly. It itches like the devil. But soft bones are required for the PTB to do its work. The human body was never intended to experience a flowering. In the process, one is contorted psychically and physically. Soft, rotting bones are pliable enough to assume a flowering shape. Again though, very painful stuff. When I begin to scream, I expect you to keep your cool though. This should all be academic to you. Are you getting any class credits from this, by the way? I see. Well, please, continue. Great. Man-made horrors beyond our comprehension. From what we can see, and as we are nonchalantly told, the organism is destroying the subject's body from inside out, rotting his bones and turning them into pliable mush. As we explore further on into his nervous system, we discover a chip in a subject's brain called a primordial inhibitor. The chip is a device implanted into the brain stem. He then goes on to explain that the chip undoes certain evolutionary safeguards against operations like this. It limits the bodily and mental reactivity to meta-existential stimuli. Putting it simply, the flowering is an evolutionary aberration, a departure from what is typical, which requires some retooling of the formation of mental concepts. Here the game gets more into some metaphysical stuff. The subject goes on to explain. For instance, one who has flowered does not experience the human idea of time. But if I tried to apprehend this with my regular old monkey mind, I would go quite insane. The changes that the PTB fungus is causing are not only affecting the subject physically, destroying his body and bones as he literally flowers into a new form, but it is also changing his mind, connecting him into a shared pool, where his human concepts and experience of time is beyond his monkey brain to fully understand. But before we explore further on, the second phase of the subject's transformation begins. The patient screams as his body morphs and distorts.
Wow, that hurt.
Sorry, I seem to have bit down too hard and broken a couple of teeth. Give me a moment to spit them out. Now then, as you can see by my face, I am midway through the flowering process. I can feel the inkling of a panpsychic connection, and my body has experienced amazing and terrible growth. See for yourself. His voice is deeper now, his skin green, and his face barely looks human. Panpsychism is a worldview that suggests that everything in the universe, from humans to animals and even inanimate objects, have some form of consciousness or mind to them. The idea is that the basic building blocks of reality, such as atoms and subatomic particles, possess some level of consciousness, and that this consciousness is what gives rise to the mind. Our subject here is slowly joining into a hive mind of sorts, connecting him with everything all at once. As we take a look at his new body, we can see that the rest of him has taken on the same color tone, and that the growth has accelerated greatly.
Aha, you've discovered that my hands have fallen off. Well, I suppose I'll never play the violin again. Joking aside, this is pretty much to be expected. Part of the primordial inhibitor is to disassociate brain and hand connectedness. As a result of this, the hands fall off, as they are merely vestigial baggage, standing in the way of a superior evolution. I'm sorry, just briefly had a bit of an ego death there for a moment. I can feel my thoughts intertwine in the rhizomatic group mind. Please, continue.
Our subject's transhumanist evolution is taking him into a level beyond our comprehension. His mind is interlinked with many others. His body is no longer his as it breaks down and discards what doesn't suit his evolution. Going bone deep now, we can see that the rest of his lower body has been turned into something I can only describe as roots. The subject then goes on to explain that his bones are now basically sponge cake. The fragmentation has begun to reassemble into a complicated and fragile lattice work, a network grid of sorts of wafer-thin psychic receptors. Some bones are even poking out of the skin.
Aha! You've discovered my new minds. To the extent that the brain is a mind, that is. We'll leave that to the philosophers. As my own mind-brain disintegrates into the group mind, what remains of my body becomes a small distribution of other flowering mind-brains. As we speak, I am flooded with powerful memories that are not my own. I feel, well, it's hard to even use the word I anymore. Even to distinguish ourselves from our timeless unity seems wrong. I feel infinite pleasure as well as infinite pain. Is this what death is? Ah, I see we're at the final stage. I complete the flowering. Infinite pleasure, pain, death. I am so happy.
And there it is. Discover my body. At the end of our subject's evolution, he has fully transcended into a panpsychical entity. His body remains as just a node of a larger network of other flowering mind brains. The memories and emotions of others are flooded and mixing with his own. He cannot even distinguish himself from the larger form anymore. The timeless unity, infinite pleasure, and infinite pain. A rather extreme way to fix a global loneliness issue. Discover My Body is a game about humanity's last evolutionary step, letting go of our bodies and achieving a higher plane of consciousness, all while using something as simple as a fungus to achieve it. The reason why fungus was chosen as the method to help us usher into our metamorphosis is no accident. Besides its psychedelic abilities, fungi are actually a much more complex life form than what first meets the eye. These unassuming organisms have a way of thriving in some of the most unlikely places, from dark and damp corners of the forest to the tiniest crevices of our homes, and even at the very bottom of oceans. Fungi are neither flora nor fauna. In fact, they are their own unique life form, with over 144,000 different species. They are so prevalent on our planet that the largest living organism to ever exist is actually a fungus. Armillaria ostii, also known as honey mushroom, is a type of fungi that grows primarily underground. It feeds on trees and spreads across forests. The biggest specimen of the species is called humongous fungus in Oregon Mallards National Forest, and it spans a whopping 3.7 square miles. That's 2,200 acres and 9.6 kilometers squared. This giant fungal entity has been quietly growing underground for thousands of years. The bulk of this organism is not visible from the surface. Only during autumn that small parts of the larger form bloom on the surface. It is known for its fascinating communication system, which involves the exchange of chemical signals called mycelial cords. These cords allow different parts of the fungus to communicate with one another over long distances, allowing them to coordinate their activity and work as a single organism. The fungus is able to better defend itself against threats and even launch coordinated attacks on other life forms. This hive mind-like form of long-distance communication is seen in-game as the ability for the host to connect with everyone else, feeling their joys and pains all at once as they undergo their transformation. The test subject says, "You've discovered my new minds. As my own mind-brain disintegrates into the group mind, what remains of my body becomes a small distribution of other flowering mind brains. As we speak, I am flooded with powerful memories that are not my own." One such fungus that looks surprisingly similar to the developed form of fungus in-game is chicken of the woods, also known as sulfur shelf or Leotoporus sulphureus. an edible mushroom that is commonly found growing on the trunks and stumps of living and dead trees. It gets its name from having a chicken-like texture and flavor when eaten. Another interesting fact about chicken of the woods is that it is a parasitical fungus, meaning that it feeds off of the tree it grows on. Unlike mutualistic fungi that grow out of and work cooperatively to benefit its host for ensuring both their survival, parasitical fungi are completely destructive and feed off their host without providing anything in return. This can lead to the gradual decay of the floral life form it is feeding off of. In the more horrific cases of this natural phenomena is when the fungi species does not infect plant life, but instead goes after a more living form of life. Entomophthalalis are a group of parasitical fungi that infect insects. They're known for their ability to take control of the insect host's mind, causing them to behave abnormally and ultimately leading to their death. This process can involve the fungus growing inside the insect's body, bursting out of its exoskeleton, allowing the fungus to release its spores and infect others, leaving only a husk of what was there before, in a gruesome scene. In the Cordyceps sinensis case, it infects the larvae of certain moth species found in the Himalayan region. Once the spores of the fungus infect the larvae, they start growing inside the body, consuming it from inside out until it eventually dies. A more known variation of this parasitical behavior is in the Orpheocordyceps unilateralis, a fungi that specifically goes after ants. I believe that the lab-synthesized fungus in-game is a parasitical fungus that takes over the host's body, slowly feeding off of it, destroying it in the process, while it completely takes over the host's brain, connecting them into something greater, a network of fungi mind brains. Just like how the Cordyceps fungus takes over the insect's mind, controlling it to finish a greater goal beyond the insect's understanding, i.e., spreading the spores, Discover My Body works around this real-life phenomenon, taking the already horrific concept and transforming it into something much more cataclysmic in nature, pushing the limits of body horror in a brilliant format that's never been seen before. Having us play as a medical student, actively observing and studying the process in real time as we scan a subject and watch the mycosis spread on the topical, skeletal, and nervous systems is nothing short of surreal. As the fungus completely destroys the test subject, physically and mentally, the whole event is treated as just a regular day at the lab. It's a brilliant form of storytelling and tells us so much more about the dystopian world of Discover My Body and the people in it with so little material. Discover My Body is just a demo of a bigger, more complete game that Yames is working on, called Discover Our Bodies. But until then, let's dive into the deep end with our next game. The ocean is a world of extremes. The underwater world inherently holds an undeniable beauty that is hard to deny. The vastness of the ocean and its myriad of sea life offers an incredible spectrum of colors and forms that can leave anyone in awe. But as almost an opposing force and contrast to this serenity is the overshadowing understanding that this is but the surface of something much bigger and much deeper. For some, the mere thought of venturing out into sea can be overwhelmingly daunting. The unknown and uncharted nature, the pressure, the lack of light, and isolation of the ocean's depths can make almost anyone deeply unsettled by the thought of being stranded in such an alien place. Descending deeper into the deep sea, reaching 4,000 meters and onwards, we reach the abyssal zone. Here, light cannot penetrate. It is complete darkness, intense pressure, and extremely cold. Just to withstand the crushing pressure and frigid temperatures of these depths, deep-sea vessels are constructed with thick, reinforced hulls and cutting-edge technology. Every detail is carefully crafted to ensure the safety of those who venture into this depth, attracted by the allure of discovery and of what awaits of them at the very bottom. It is estimated that only a mere 5% of the ocean's depths have been explored. Yet despite the formidable challenges of the deep sea, life finds a way. In this unforgiving environment, some of the most incredible and bizarre creatures on this planet have made it their home. Life this deep underwater can only be described as alien. Water Womb World is a game that takes place entirely in this world. Its story follows an unnamed protagonist as he ventures into the deep unknown. A Catholic researcher in search of evidence of the place where humanity originated from. This research has led him into exploring the deep ocean floor. The game begins with a monologue by our protagonist. Though I am a Christian man, I have long forsworn any contentment in its primitive superstitions. The mysticism, the rituals, I know they are all articulations of a deeper material fact. In older times, it was seen that the order of the scientific world and the perfection of God's plan confirmed each other at every turn. Well, I still believe this to be the case, although in quite an unorthodox way. My lifelong work has been to find the origin point of man's fall from grace. It has taken me all over the world, but I believe I am closer than ever to finding the truth. I am heading deep into the ocean, into a region they call Gasper's Zone. I have everything I need in my submersible lab. I hope to find some answers soon. Rejecting the contentment of the primitive superstitions of his fate, our unnamed protagonist believes there is a real material and scientific truth to its mysticism. In order to confirm his theory on the origin point of man's creation, he is going deep in the ocean, in Gasper's Zone, a deep and mysterious region of the ocean floor. Soon I will tread on the holy seabed, where the spirit blew life into the increate mantle. I have lit my path with the submersible's lights. It is a blessed day. Before I leave, I ought to fill up my tank and grab some nets for specimen collection. I'm going to need both if I'm gonna do my research. Our character's deeply religious nature makes him believe he is treading on holy sea land. We grab our nets, fill up our oxygen tank, and head out into the dark depths. Even with my lights, it is still quite dark out here. Well, as long as they're on, I'm sure I'll be fine. Time to begin. May God guide me. The gameplay loop from this point forwards consists of us exploring around our submersible, sifting through the sand for samples and catching fish that swim by us with our nets, before going back into our lab and studying what we have found. And before long, we find our first object, an ancient human skull coming from the time before Adam's fall from grace. A dive mask. Somebody has been down here before. And a live specimen, caught to be studied. I have been blessed with a bounty to research, and it's time to go back to the lab and begin. I can barely contain my excitement. All my life's work has led up to this moment. Even though I have been down here but briefly, I can feel God working in my heart and opening my mind. The original sin of man, the original temptation, was that God opening the mind too? I am alone here, but I feel the comfort of the Holy Spirit and a connectedness to all things. The human being was made in the image of God, a divine mirror of creation that was made imperfect by our sin. I can feel it sometimes in the strangeness of my body, as if I was once connected to the source and severed from it. As if I was once a thing rooted in a vaster whole, but I was violently removed and left to flow freely by my own. Well, as I have said, I should get back to work. Letting our computer system scan our first item, it comes back with a brief description of its properties. Atomized skull, partially fossilized, remains of a son of Adam, contains 5% ancestral corruption. By approximate calculations, this human lived for about a millennium and was born 10 generations after the primeval fall. High bone density suggests aquatic lifestyle. Fascinating. This person was extremely close to the source of Genesis, to the birth of all creation. They lived to be very, very old and have only a trace of degeneration. The bone density. Yes, one of the pillars of the aquatic Edenic studies is that early man lived underwater. Countless generations have passed since such a time, and the form the sons of Adam take now is very different. I can only imagine what it looked like to be so pure, so near the state of grace. Here the game gives us our first real hint at the truth of what we are uncovering. Aqua-Edenic man, or the aquatic ape hypothesis, is a fascinating yet controversial theory that suggests a deep connection between early humans and the ocean. It proposes that our ancient ancestors were semi-aquatic creatures who spent a significant portion of their lives in the water, developing unique adaptations that would later help shape our evolution. Bipedalism, subcutaneous fat, and the ability to hold our breath are among the many adaptations that we have supposedly inherited from our aquatic ancestors. I'll load up the next sample. Dive mask. Production date, mid-20th century. Rubber squirted dive mask, ornamented with various Christographs, biblical inscriptions. This mask would prove that I'm not the first one to explore Gasper's Zone. However, this area is entirely remote, meaning whoever was here on purpose. Judging by the crucifixes on the strap, I imagine explorers were sent here by the church. There are certain divisions in the papal conclave who are in the know, but some would prefer to occlude the truth from the world. Were these explorers eliminated by more traditional factions? And what did they discover? Where are they now? It seems like there is some sort of conspiracy at play here. The church seems to know about the existence of Gasper's Zone and its connection with early man, but it seems like somebody is trying to keep it all covered up. I'll take a look at the next sample. Ancient fish, carbon dating estimation, 10,000 years. Laser vivisection yielded fish fed on native coral forms. Hypercalcified bone structure, tensile strength matching modern metamaterials. Amazing! This fish may have very well been alive during the time of the pre-deluge patriarchs. This very well may confirm the theory of Gasper's Zone being located in or around Edenic ground. But how? Some of suspension of space-time or some biological decelerations of the aging process? Our character believes the Gasper's Zone to have been part of the Garden of Eden. The term pre-deluge patriarchs generally refers to the biblical figures listed in the genealogies before the Great Flood, who were believed to have lived exceptionally long lives. This fish is truly ancient and seems to have been alive since the time before the Great Flood. The fact that it was still swimming around and alive by the time we caught it speaks to the strangeness of the Gasper zone. I must conclude more extensive search. Soon, I should go out for more samples. But before we can do that, a deafening sound can be heard echoing from outside. What was that? A whale? It sounded even bigger. I should go check outside. As our character plunges back into the dark waters, he can feel something stirring within him, feeling the light of God with him. He swims forward before something introduces itself. Son of Adam, I beseech thee, your forebears abandoned the tree of life and ate of the fruit of knowledge. You walk a contrary path. You will leave this place, or you will exchange one life for another, die as a man, or join God in full flesh. To hear the voice of your God is to return original word, back into the womb where words would fail. Know this now. I am but his created messenger. This is all I know. Son of Adam, I beseech thee. Before this point in the game, we can say that something abnormal was taking place in the Gasper zone. We had clues of the area's anomalous properties, ancient human skulls, immortal fish that seems to share DNA with humans, and a conspiracy by the church to silence whatever information or research leaving this area. But now we can see that this might actually be, like our character suspects, Edenic holy grounds, the origin point of humanity, and maybe even home of the Creator. The angel comes to warn us to turn back. He urgently asks us to back away. He speaks to the protagonist in cryptic messages about his ancestors eating from the fruit of knowledge and forsaking the tree of life, about having to choose between leaving this place or exchanging one life for another, die as a man or join God in full flesh. He warns him that hearing the voice of God is to return original word, back into the womb where words would fail. Our character is left confused and disoriented. But with his theory confirmed, he ignores the messenger's warnings and doubles down on discovering the truth. An angel, an emissary of the Lord, amazing. Their visage even matches the description in the deciphered Genesis Apocryphon. To see such sights, can it be possible? But what did their message mean? Full flesh in God. I can't postpone my research any longer. I am closer than ever, and I will find the truth. I must find more samples. Before we go out for another time, we take a look in our mirror, grab our nets, refill our oxygen, and leave. Time to change it up. I ought to find 2 live specimens and 1 object in the silt. I feel as if I barely even need this oxygen underwater anymore. I am closer to God than ever. Being down here for so long has taken its toll on him. Or perhaps being so close to the Creator, our character is changing original words into a form that doesn't even need oxygen to survive underwater. We continue looking around, finding a strange red coral, the same one found inside the ancient fish, and catching 2 more live specimens before going back into our lab. Excellent. Now I ought to go back to the lab to begin my research. It has been interesting swimming down here. The dark and gloom is almost a comfort to me. I am reminded of Moses seeing God in the luminous dark, the indifferentiated infinitude, incomprehensible to the created mind. But I believe I can know God, and I know God. As we go back to our lab, our character expresses feelings of exhaustion and dizziness, and a blissful lightness in his mind as the knowledge he has gained seems to flee from him. He is closer to the ultimate truth now. We take another look at the mirror, and something seems wrong. But we press on anyways to analyze our samples. Deathless fish, cross-analysis with previous fish sample. Fish age precedes previous estimations, born sometime in Jurassic period. Cellular growth, abnormal, almost completely still. Stomach contents reveal more native coral forms. DNA contains proto-human proteins. This fish is even older. Amazing, almost impossible. There is some common link between this life form and our own. I notice as well, this fish as well as others are lacking eyes. Not unheard of among fish of the deep ocean. But even blind fish can sense the difference between light and darkness. These fish lack that capacity completely. And more of that odd coral in the gut. What does it mean? There must be something. All of a sudden I feel. Deathless fish too. Unknown morphology. 50% of sample consists of coral polyp. Age again exceeds multiple geological periods. Secretions of unknown stone substance. DNA contains proto-human proteins. So old. Impossibly old. The ancient of days. Time seems to spiral out in front of me. The divine plan, imprinted in all things. How is it? This fish seems to have been close to the origin of life itself. Two extremely ancient fish from a time close to the origin of life itself, both containing proto-human DNA and seem to lack the ability to see completely. I'll take a look at the next thing. Red coral, origin unknown, studded with proto-human neuron, hyper-capable of creating consciousness field. Womb of God. Our computer seems to have a hard time examining the substance, claiming it is covered with proto-human neurons, that it is hyper-capable of creating consciousness fields, and that it is Womb of God, before giving us nothing but errors. What does it mean? I can barely read this. My own sight seems to be failing. Perhaps decompression sickness. But it seems greater than that, like the symbols of the world are falling from their place. I feel so. Our submersible's power goes out. The light? Another angel? Oh Lord, I can feel your love. Running out of options, we head out into the abyss to see who caused this.
Womb. Hunger. I am hunger. Go and join angels. Join God.
Whatever those beings were that spoke to us seemed to have greatly accelerated our character's mental deterioration. Unable to even speak properly or think cohesively. All we can say now is hunger, angels, and join God. We take one last look at the mirror, and we are unrecognizable. As we try to refill our oxygen to head out for one more time, our character refuses, claiming to not need it anymore. We plunge our way back into the deep, dark abyss. We seem to have changed into a new form. In complete darkness, all we can do is move forward, driven by the need to find something, by a hunger. The only thing left for us to do is to feed on the red coral. Until just like the angel warned us, we have reached a place where words would fail. We have joined back original words with God. Like our protagonist said at the very start, he is alone here, but feels a comfort and connectedness to the Holy Spirit. A strangeness in his body, as if he was connected to a larger whole and violently severed from it. Our character's transformation is him going back into this larger whole, this entity he calls God. We transform into a red entity, which seems to be part of his body. Our character loses his sense of sight, as he literally joins with God. The Gasper Zone is not only a Garden of Eden, but it is an underwater womb of all life and creation. It is the place where God created Adam and Eve. It is a literal water womb world. I find water womb world an extremely interesting idea explored in a very creative way. The theory that mankind somehow evolved in aquatic environments is a well-known yet not very accepted theory. The game uses this hypothesis to suggest a darker reality, a truth hidden by our institutions. The reality that the origin of humanity isn't creationism, nor completely evolutionary, but stems from something much more sinister, a cosmic power deep within our oceans, beyond our comprehension, an entity which has given birth to all life on Earth, a literal womb. It twists biblical stories and descriptions into disturbed and altered versions. The Garden of Eden is nothing but a deep sea bed. The blindness of early man from good and evil is a literal lack of vision, a blindness from light and dark, due to the nature of deep sea life. And the apple of Eden is changed into a coral, a flesh of God, with the ability to mutate its eater and give them consciousness. It is a perfect case of primordial horror. The ending of the game leaves much to be theorized. What happens to our protagonist? What is the true meaning of this truth? And what will take place in the future are all left unanswered. And as for the deep sea itself, it will always have its mysteries. In both Discover My Body and Water Womb World, the player is thrown into the forefront of a new frontier, where exploration is his only key to uncover the game's story. The game utilizes real-world phenomena and concepts and twists them into horror. Yames has this uncanny ability to evoke a sense of terror from the most mundane elements, utilizing nothing but simple pixel art and dialogue. Through this, he transports the player into his worlds. A perfect example of how internet indie horror games have become a unique and valuable addition to the horror genre, providing a fresh perspective with their unconventional storytelling methods, offering a unique experience for horror that I rarely see anywhere else. In the future, I hope to continue to explore other worlds of indie horror games. Until then, I wish you have enjoyed your stay, and I will see you all very soon.